Strong Dads wants to thank Quality Auto Mart for joining us as a sponsor. Quality Auto Mart was born in 1985. They are owned and operated by Mark and Nancy Repke. Quality Auto Mart provides all the services, repairs, and maintenance for your vehicle's needs with a 3-year auto parts and labor warranty. They offer complimentary vehicle safety inspection and estimates. Also, they offer a shuttle service, and the 4th oil change is always on them. They are located at 7307 on State Road 46 in Batesville, Indiana. Make sure you give them a call at 812-934-2301. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Strong Dads here doing another show. Merle, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man.
Awesome.
I was told I was a mean dude by my kids.
Uh-oh.
I was being a jerk.
Oh, this morning or just in general?
In general.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What did you do?
No, we had a question the other day. We had a question. So we do a after dinner question of the night kind of thing. Okay.
Right.
And really, like, I think I've shared that on shows before, but our kids love it. Our son's always like, what's question? What's question of the night? And sometimes we just sort of make one up, but over the years, Linda has bought all kinds of questions for discussions or discussion points, like decks of cards. And so I just randomly pulled one out, and the question basically was, of the parents in this house, or for the parents in this house, referring to Linda and I, how would you rate them on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of strictness?
Ooh.
And so as soon as I read it, I started laughing. I'm like, oh, okay.
Did you like get midway through and you're like, nope, I'm not going to finish that one. Next question, discard that one.
No, I was ready for it. So, but then all of a sudden the kids were like looking at Linda and I like, should we answer this? Are we being set up here? I think I'm going to answer this and I'm going to have to go to my room for 3 weeks.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So anyway, so the idea really, we are going to carry this into our show, is the whole idea of strictness in our life. We think about coaches, we think about parents, and sometimes just the word strict has a real negative connotation to it.
I would agree, yeah.
Oh man, that means mean.
Right.
And so, I even, the title here is, who would your kids say is meaner, you or your wife?
Well, and I think that's a good point, because I think probably in the eyes of our kids, it's not like who's stricter, who's meaner, probably, at a young age. Because, just what you were talking about, like, that word strict kind of has like a negative connotation behind it. And I think a lot of us, as men growing up or whether it be in school or our actual parents, like, I think the definition of strict means something different to us than it does for our kids, that they do see it as you're just being mean, where we may see I'm just holding you to a standard and you have to follow it, and that's me being strict. And okay.
No, you're being mean. Yeah. So between you and Jen, who's meaner? You're meaner?
It depends. Like it just depends on, like, if it's like clean your room, that's totally Jenny. She's much more strict on that. If it's like, whatever, pushing your sister over, that's me. I'll blow some heinies.
Okay. Great. Now I got to cut that out because some woke individual will be like, you did what to your kid is? Oh, cool. So who's the toughest coach you ever had? How about that? Like, think about coaches you've had. Did you have a coach that was tough that you liked?
I did. I actually, it was, to date, is still probably my favorite coach, besides my dad, obviously. Dad growing up playing basketball. No, but my cross country coach in high school, Mr. Dobson.
Yeah, you've mentioned him before on shows.
Was a big influence. Cross country was definitely my primary sport in high school. It was something that I did pretty well in. We had a very competitive team, the guys and the girls side, in high school. And I would say Mr. Dobson was the one coach that was very tough on me, because he expected a lot from me.
Yeah.
He set the expectation at the beginning of the season. This is where we're at. This is our goal, is going to state. He instituted like a 400-mile club in the summertime, so you had to put 400 miles in the 2.5 months of your summer break. We got T-shirts for it. He basically set a standard, and he held us to that standard. And I at the time, you know, there was certain times he would get on us about doing things. I'm like, golly, he's just being a jerk, right? But looking at hindsight now, we were very successful, and it would definitely contributed to that. I mean, he is now a coach over at Mason High School, and that program is excelling, and it's because he is strict, because he does have a standard, and he holds the people to it. So I would definitely say Mr. Dobson. So if you're out there, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really what it's about. And that's kind of what this show is about, and making sure we drill down a little bit of the understanding of strictness, what it means. Because we're really not advocating here strict in the sense of abusive or mean or that. Like, no, there's no place really for that sort of thing in parenting or coaching. But man, like strict in terms of this is what we're doing. You know, here's the standard, and why that's so important. You know, because what I think about that is not only did you guys as a cross-country team have success, but think about now the grit or the toughness and perseverance that you still have in you today because of that. Like you remember, like, no, like I ran cross country. I know I can get through this.
I still, and it's kind of funny because I tell Mia this all the time, because I remember Mr. Dobson telling me, like, he was a big advocate of not looking behind you in the middle of the race. Don't look where you've been. Look where you're going. Look ahead of you. Look at the next person ahead. That's who you're going to accomplish. And I tell Mia all the time, like, quit looking at where you've been. Look at where you want to go. Yeah. And that was definitely a Mr. Dobson thing. So What about you? What about who was your toughest coach?
I had lots of coaches coming through, like with baseball. And it's funny now when I think back of like when I was a young kid, I didn't think the guy ever laughed. It was, and that's not true at all. Like it wasn't true at all. Mr. Kolb, he was a super nice guy, but he was just always very like, okay, we're going to run practice. Here's what we're doing. And so we didn't screw around in his presence. And I mean, we were little guys still, you know, not whole ball. And we didn't screw around. And I remember right from the bat, like, going to practice, and if I'd see a guy screwing around, I'd step away from him because I knew Mr. Cole was like, go, run. So, but he wasn't the greatest influencer, just because as I matured and got into high school, I think I've mentioned before, my swim coach, Brent Rudemiller. And Brent was a guy who really created the grit of, and it wasn't so much in the competitions, it was the day-to-day practice stuff. Early morning workouts, you know, pressing you when you didn't want to be there. And now, like, my son's on the swimming and diving team, and he has morning practices, and he just knows, like, him complaining about morning practice is falling on deaf ears. Like, I don't really care. You know, I'm like, dude, it's what you do.
Yeah, you committed to it.
You committed to it. And because, you know, like, you and I know, like, he's going to draw back on this. Like, when he's 25, he's going to be like, well, no, I used to get up and do practice, like, and he's going to use that as something that held him up and made him stronger versus, well, my life was miserable because I did that. So, anyway,
I like it. Yeah, it's as we get into the show, I think it'll be a good conversation. Hopefully, we'll go back and forth, talk about how mean you are as a dad. So, anyways, let's thank our sponsor real quick, and then we'll get into it. So, Strong Dads, we would love to thank Quality Auto Mart for coming alongside of us. Really do appreciate them. Automotive needs, check them out under new ownership. So, really do still appreciate Quality Auto Mart for coming alongside of us.
All right, want to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for being a sponsor of Strong Dads podcast. So we want to thank those guys for continuing to support our messaging. Just talked to Casey the other day. All things are good with him. And so we just continue to be supported, and we want to thank him. And so in order to do that, we ask that you guys go down and hang out at Casey's or Quality Auto Mart to do a little bit of business with them.
Love it.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about this whole idea of strictness. The opposite of strictness oftentimes would be another term that we use in parenting a lot is permissiveness. Okay. And, you know, when you have a child-centered home, child-centered home became like this big deal in the 90s and early 2000s. Oh, do you have a child-centered home? My home is child-centered. And the dads didn't take it or leave it. They just heard their wives talking about it and go, oh, well, I guess that's what we should do because it sounds good. And child-centered gives way too much weight to the feelings of the child in their current state. And we've talked many times before about the current state of a child is a selfish state. And that's not a mean statement. That is just a natural state that, hey, the world, basically, they only see it through their eyes. They haven't learned things like empathy and service to others and all these things yet at the level that they're going to. And so if I tell my kid they need to go to bed at 9 o'clock, they might do a little bit of kickback. Well, can't I stay up later? My friends stay up later. If I tell them they can't eat something or whatever. And so a child-centered parent will oftentimes find himself falling into greater permissiveness. Allowing, you can do this, permitting them to do whatever. Do you think that makes the kid happy or not?
Yeah, that's. I think this idea of being permissive. Versus kind of being the quote unquote strict or essentially kind of almost might be looked at as almost like micromanaging, right? And I think there's as you were kind of talking, it made me think, and I referred to this a show I did by myself a while ago. We were actually just talking about this, but the book from Jocko, he talks about the dichotomies of leadership. So these two opposite entities that have to come together and have this balance in order to truly, kind of have the best of both of them, right? So I think there's definitely something to be said about allowing your kids a little bit of space, a little bit of that independence, right? But also understanding that you are the parent at the end of the day. There has to be some rules or regulations that are set before the kids to hopefully, help them, kind of guide them in that position. So I think when it comes to this idea of being strict or, allowing your kids to essentially just run free, and I think a result of that is obviously going to be that kind of permissive. I think there's definitely got to be a balance that, the two polar opposites have to kind of come together in order to, hopefully develop it and raise, the next generation to, again, raise their kids. Again, kind of what you're talking about, with your son right now going through swim practice, he's going to look back on that and he's going to draw from that, in the future. And it's a lesson he's learning.
Well, I like the word that you use because really a lot of parents would not consider themselves strict. But they're micromanagers. They're helicopter parents. And so they could even be permissive, but they make sure they know everything that their child's doing, which is just like you said, that's even more detrimental in many aspects because the kid doesn't have that opportunity to do a little bit of free range, do a little bit of, I'm going to figure this out on my own. And maybe it doesn't always work out well, but they figure it out on their own. And so that micromanagement is a big deal, and I guess the question might be like, well, what's behind that? Why are parents actually micromanaging right, to the extreme? So you're talking about strictness over the top, right, every single minute.
Right.
Or why are they being like super permissive? Like whatever the kid wants to do, he can do.
Well, I think to what you're talking about, how it's kind of almost been like this quote unquote movement, right? In society, it's kind of like, again, the child-centered home, that it's like, I think part of it could just become, and not necessarily saying this is, it's almost like an ignorance thing, right? That you don't know what you don't know, right? So you kind of almost just try it and see if it works out. And I think, part of it, we've talked a lot about the vision. I think maybe some of the lack of strictness in the home or the ability to just let your kids run wild comes from maybe not having a vision between you and your spouse, especially if you have different ideas on how parenting should go. When those don't exactly come together, there's some friction in there. So then it's just sometimes men just sometimes throw their hands up. Okay, well, let's just whatever you want to do then, right? And so maybe that plays a part in it.
Yeah, they're for sure. I think coming together on that, because like you said, you're trying to balance your own personalities between you and your spouse. And I see the micromanaging parent is a very insecure parent. Very insecure in that every failure the kid has is a reflection of their failure. So I have to make sure my kid has got everything covered. And we'll say, it's for your own good. But really, I just can't deal with my kid not being perfect. And then the other side is the insecurity of not being liked, the extreme permissive parents.
Yeah.
Like, well, and again, this is probably becoming overused, but you're not your kid's friend. You're their parent.
Yeah.
And so the number of parents who seek a level of friendship greater than parentship is, all out of insecurity. Like, I don't want my kid to be mad at me.
Right. Isn't it funny that I would venture to say if you surveyed every guy out there, like, hey, your boss at work, like, do you want a boss that micromanages you, right?
Yeah.
They would all be like, hell no, right? I don't want that. I want a little bit of freedom. And then all of a sudden you go home and you're like, okay, you essentially do that to your kids. And again, they're different, but they're still the same, right? I mean, it's still a relationship that you're trying to build. You're trying to, teach your kids something, at work, if you have a boss, a supervisor, they have expectations. So it's like, it is different in the sense you're dealing with kids versus adults, but there is definitely some similarities there.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's move to the idea then that, okay, so then what would strictness look like, and why might we do it? And I think this is more. This is a show for parents, but this is a dad show, and I think we're directing it the strictness part because there's a different level of strength and authority that just comes through maleness.
Correct.
And that's not to take away anything, because there's a different level of nurturing and caring that comes through femaleness, and that just is what it is. And so the idea here is a question that I proposed to my kids the other day is, recently the mega lottery was like $1.3 billion.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And we were having the conversation, what would you do? And of course that's fun to just dream about, but to watch your kids, like, I'd buy a new pair of shoes. I'm like, oh dude, like, really, you can get whatever you want. Okay.
Right.
And, but we also then talk about how, with our kids, we talk about how there's something really weird about the idea that a high percentage, and I don't even know what that percentage is, but a major percentage of big time lottery winners end up bankrupt or having a destroyed life. What happens with that, right? What happens with that? And so it relates to this. There's this whole phenomena of, anything that's worth having is worth working for, or nothing good ever came easy, or the higher the cost, the greater the value. These are different things. Like, you and I now know, we were talking about you studying for promotion. This is going to be a pain in your butt. But when you get that, you're going to be like, I got that. And versus if you walked into the station tomorrow and somebody said, hey, Cap, how'd I get captain? Oh, we're just going to start calling you captain. There'd be no value to that.
Right. And I mean, don't you think that it's the road getting to there, right? It's like you were saying, that working hard to achieve something, talking about, you have obviously brought this up on the show, and I know it's in, again, going back to Jocko, that discipline equals freedom, finding that self-discipline, just what you were talking about this morning, getting up and actually doing something, right? Actually, for me, cracking open those promotional books and actually spending that time. But again, it's got to be something that we actually are intentionally doing. It's not just going to happen, right? And again, those are the things that as we go, move this back towards being a dad and parenting our kids, how trying to teach our kids discipline in their eyes may come across as you're just being really strict. But again, having that outside perspective, having that different perspective than our kids are in the midst of it, having that perspective that, no, I'm trying to teach you discipline, right? In your eyes is coming across as you're just being a jerk and strict and mean, right? But again, it's just kind of finding that balance. So we want to teach our kids, but we also don't want to be a micromanage where you're like, you're going to do this, and this, because then it's going to get you that discipline that I know you're going to need. Yeah.
Well, and Jocko states this, and we've done shows and done research on it too. There's, of the top characteristics of successful people, content people in life, and you define success however you want, whether it's money, marriage, whatever. Self-discipline is always among the top couple of things that it takes, that people go, I just had to learn to discipline myself. And so if we know that that's the case, then why would we be building our home in permissiveness other than it makes it easier in the moment? And so that speaks to our own lack of self-discipline. Like, I don't want to hear my kid kick back at me. It's too much of an aggravation. So I use this phrase as a dad, whatever, just do whatever you're going to do anyway. Yeah. Like that's just lazy parenting. Yeah. That's lack of your own self-discipline. And so I think it's important that we, stress that. Like, listen, here are some points. There's 10 little points here that we just want to touch on quickly. How you and your wife can come together and go, how do we do the balance between strictness and permissiveness? How do we do this well so that we can benefit our kids long term, so that when they are adults someday, they can say, you know what, Dad was sometimes a jerk, but I know why now. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Right, and this first one, we've talked about this before. I know we talked about it, but we've also talked about kind of a way to almost test it and see if you're really kind of doing this for your family. And this is the idea of clearly stating your family values. It's kind of funny because after one of our shows, I did it that evening at the dinner table. Like, girls, what does our family stand for? What are the things that Mom and Daddy want to teach you? And man, what a great checks and balance for you and your wife to be able to be like, okay, are we doing what we said we needed to do in order to clearly state these values for our kids? Because if they can't pick up on them, if they don't even know what those values are, then man, I think we're just really missing the mark. And again, this is an ongoing process, right? So as your kids get older and they're moving into different stages in their life, those value systems should always have a same underline, but they're going to change in the sense of, okay, now you're in high school, you're involved in a lot of sports. We want you to do that, but we also, the core value is this family. This is going to come first. Again, as our kids change and move and develop in their life, I think, again, that the underline of the value system has to stay the same, but there can be some ebbs and flows of those.
Right. I mean, but the important part is you and your spouse coming together and identifying those values and stop making the assumptions of what the values are. Like, if you say you value that your kid has a work ethic or behaves in school or whatever it is, then you both have to then state it. And your kids, like you said, they need to know it. Yeah. Like, your kids should be able to say those things out to other people, or at least be able to say, I know what happens if I don't. Yep. Which leads me to the next thing. So once you state your values, then you and your wife need to come together, and then you set the expectations on behavior, right? The expectations on behavior. So maybe a value is trust and honesty. That's, in our home, we have trust and honesty are some values that we have. Okay, so the expectation is we do not tolerate lying, right? Because lying is a behavior. We do not tolerate laying around the house when there are chores to be done. Yeah. All right, so we go after very more specific behaviors, and we talk about this is what we would like you to do, and this is what we don't want you to do. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and with those expectations, going to the next one, like you part of, once your kids understand the expectations, there's no way to move to the next one of clearly stating the rewards or the consequences if you haven't first off lay those expectations out. Yeah. So this is what's going to happen if you don't, do what you're supposed to do. The expectation we've laid, if you don't, do your chores and you want to sit around the house all day, this is what you can expect is going to happen because you didn't meet that expectation. Yeah. So again, it's kind of that going back to the first point, that checks and balances of, hey, this is what we want from you, and if you don't meet this is going to be the punishment. If you do meet it, then X, Y, Z will happen. Whether it be you're giving an allowance. If you accomplish your chores, you'll get your allowance. If you can do your chores, do your homework when you first get home, you can go outside and play for 10, 15 minutes, whatever that's going to look like for you. But in order to actually have rewards or consequences, you have to have the expectations first.
Yeah, the highest percentage of the time, people will work into the direction of rewards. Most of the time I drive safely because the reward is I stay alive. I don't get hurt. I don't hurt people. And so 90 99% of the time, I just am driven by doing the right thing in terms of my driving. Every now and then I get selfish and I might speed or be more reckless. And I just need to know, like, oh, I get a speeding ticket today. Now I whine and complain like a 3-year-old, right? That's where kids especially come off as you're being mean, right? The police officers being mean to me.
Right.
It's like, no, most of the time, dude, you understand the reward, but the reward is we just take it for granted, right? And just like in your kid's life, if the kid just understands that you're predictable, and 9 times out of 10, when they just do the right thing, things are going to go their direction. But on the occasion that they choose to not go that direction, and I will say
on the occasion,
this
happens way more often than I want to, Merle.
Well, we're slowly in the teaching process here.
Well, it's funny you said about the driving safely. So to me, like I know what the consequences if I don't drive safely, right? Or if I speed, right? And then I'll go on a run where I'll be on an auto action. I'm like, okay, I'm going to drive under the speed limit now, right? Because I've seen the consequence. I've seen and it's just like, I think the same can be said about our kids. It's like, sometimes you may lay out the expectations, the reward and the consequences, and they're still going to test those waters. And then maybe they, the consequences for not following this expectation need to be reiterated a couple of times, whether that's whatever, go to your room, time out, a spanking, whatever that looks like. They need to kind of feel what that consequences of not not actually doing the expectation actually feels like.
And this is part of the strictness. Yeah. But this has nothing to do with us and on this show desiring meanness.
Right.
So meanness has a level of vindication to it, meaning you are sadistically, is that a right word? Sadistically,
yeah.
Yeah, you are trying to inflict pain.
Yeah.
You're trying to make them uncomfortable. And so that's not what we're talking about. What we're saying is, hey, there's a price you're going to pay, and you're going to pay it. And no one's going to get you off of this one. Right?
Yeah. You've talked a lot about this one before, whether it be your kids, forgetting their homework, forgetting their lunch, this idea of always kind of stepping in and always be, always saving them from their failures. And I think, man, this is a tough one because, I can't, especially now my girls are school age where they'll be like, I'll get ready to drop them off and be like, I forgot this. And it's like, we're less than a mile away from the school. So you got to weigh that, right? Are you the helicopter parent that always has the answer, that always can step in and come to the rescue? Or at some point, again, the expectation is you get yourself ready in the morning, and that means getting your homework, getting your laptop in the bag, and those are the expectations. And mom and daddy will help you out that first time, but after that, at some point, you're going to have to, not too long ago, Ava lost a library book. So it's like, okay, so now there's a financial obligation associated with this. So it's like, okay, what do we do? So we told Ava, like, okay, this first book, we're going to split it 50-50. We need you to feel the effects of you not taking responsibility for your library book. If it happens again, you're going to have to pay for all of it.
Right.
And it's just this again, if we just say, okay, we didn't lay that expectation out, then when all of a sudden we're like, okay, cough over $10 for this book, right? She's going to be like, what the heck? So I think just as you talk about, encouraging your kids and really getting to a place, kind of weighing in those risks. Like, if you don't do this, this could happen.
Yeah. And the part, and I see this especially with boys, girls too, but I want to teach my kid to not be afraid of risk.
Yeah.
And I want them to learn how to assess the risk.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm going to drive a little faster today to school. I'm a 16-year-old. I got my driver's license. And I'm not going to look at my kid and say, you better never drive fast, because, well, that would be hypocrisy leaking out of every pore of my body. Okay. But the idea there would be like, listen, however you drive, you better figure out how you're going to cover that.
Yeah.
And so then I want them to actually go through that whole risk reward assessment to see, okay, is this a good calculated risk? You know what? There's about an 80% chance that there's a cop going to be sitting right around that corner over there, because I've seen it many times. This is not a place that is probably going to pay off. All right, good. You're thinking, you're using your head, you're evaluating. And so life is risk every day. right? Every day. What we're really trying to do is not keep our kids, in a bubble wrap room. What we're trying to do is say, teach them how to assess. All right. What's it going to cost you? What are you willing to pay? All right. You're willing to pay that? All right. Go ahead. See how it pans out.
And when they do fail, or they do, they've weighed the risk versus reward, and they're feeling the consequences of it. Man, I think it's so crucial for us as dads to step in, and I don't know, maybe it's just a role that I find myself in, is kind of encouraging them to try it again. You got knocked over, right? You decided you wanted to go play basketball, which great, let's do it, right? And then you got knocked over. Okay, let's get back up, right? And I tell my girls this all the time. It's not about that. It's not about you failing. It's about how you respond from that failure. So the next time, how are you going to change it? How are you going to make sure you change something a little bit different, approach a situation? So, again, just going back to this idea of we're trying to, hopefully get our kids to have a little bit of self-discipline, because with that, then I think if we can teach our kids discipline, that's where they're not going to necessarily see a strict, okay, mom and daddy are giving me a little bit of freedom, because with discipline comes freedom, right? And so this idea of encouraging our kids to get back up on the horse, try it again. Let's do it again to see if we can succeed.
You ever been bucked off of a horse?
I have not. I do not want to.
Get back up on the horse. I've been bucked off of a horse. And, that's all fun and games until you're flying through the air, and then you hit the ground and you can't breathe. And you're going, and literally that's what my dad was really big on, this get back on the horse thing. And he was like, in his own way of language, get your blankety blank back up, dust yourself off, and you're getting back on that horse. Dad, I can't even breathe. No. But that's the idea, because if I leave in an impaired state, in other words, I'm anxious, afraid, whatever, that will be the last thing I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so I need to make sure I leave saying, no, I mastered that. Yep. So get back up on the horse.
Yep. I like it. I was at a shooting range one time, and I got, looking through the scope, and I got hit right in the head, right in the eye, right? I almost knocked myself out, right? But I'm like, daggone it, I need to make sure I'm like, I need to shoot this gun again to make sure I know that I can do it without getting smoked in the face. Yeah, you get
the nice smile above the eyebrow.
I busted myself good.
Those are fun.
Oh, yeah.
No. All right. So the number 6 one is encourage them to problem solve their challenges. Man, I'm telling you, working in the school world, I saw so many kids get rescued so frequently. And this goes back to the idea of, mom bringing the lunchbox or whatever. But here's the real point. Teach them how to problem solve. The idea that they come to you and they're whining about not getting something or something not working out, instead of you coming up with the ideas, well, maybe you could do this, maybe you could do that. Well, how about I'll do this for you. Yeah. No, you're basically handicapping your kid. Now, they're not going to like when you say you figure it out on your own. That's going to come off as being mean. Yeah. But what that is actually doing is holding them to a standard of them learning how to be self-sufficient. Yep. Right. And they didn't come out self-sufficient. So we're training them up in the growth of self-sufficiency. So the idea here is when your kids come up with a challenge, do not problem solve it for them. You can prompt it. And so sometimes you can say, have you thought about this direction? Yeah. But don't give them the answer. Good teachers don't give answers. Okay. Yep. They can just basically open the avenue to the process of solving the problem.
I love it. Yeah. This next one I think is really crucial. Again, we're talking to the strong dads out there. This is the hard one, but this is also something that is required of us, and that's offering grace to your kids, knowing that at the end of the day, I have a 9 and a 7-year-old. And again, I know, putting myself in their shoes and understanding okay, a 9 and 7-year-old, how are they really thinking, right? And just giving them that grace that when they do fail, because they're going to, giving, if you're gonna hold them to a standard, you're gonna have to hold yourself to the same standard. So it's like if I'm expecting them to never mess up, then I as a dad can't ever mess up, and obviously no one's gonna expect you to do that. So I just think offering grace to your kids is gonna be so crucial, because again, it's finding that balance of being strict versus permissive, and just allowing your kids to essentially run wild, right? And again, you just have to find that balance, and through all that, there has to be grace given to your kids, because you're going to want them to give you grace too.
Yeah, grace is really the seasoning that separates meanness from strictness. Okay, if there's never any grace, then that is mean. Okay, like now you're just being a tyrannical jerk. But if you sprinkle in grace when it is appropriate, and when we understand that the intentions of the child were not intended, then the grace is how we show them there's such a thing as a second chance. All right.
I'll let you take this one, because I failed miserably at this one, Merle. I have 2 girls, and I am not good at offering emotional support. I right here, Kyle Crawford, I failed miserably at this one. Help me, Merle.
Because you have no emotions, right?
Help me, Merle. Help me.
Well, I think us guys, maybe a big reason why us guys struggle with emotional support, and Lynn and I were just talking about this actually this morning. Most men I know are really uncomfortable with emotions, myself included. Like, I will avoid emotional conversations, even with my wife. I mean, this is what I do for a living, and I can delve into your emotions, but I'm not going to really get into mine. Okay, and so it's uncomfortable because we don't like the feelings that it has. I don't like the idea, like I could cry, I could slam the wall, like all these extremes freak me out. And so when our kids are needing an emotional support, we tend to just go, suck it up or figure it out, that kind of thing. And so guilty as charged. But the emotional support, really what I'm talking about there is the idea that you acknowledge their struggle. You're not dismissing it. You're not saying you shouldn't have a problem with that. This should not be making you sad or upset. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, I understand that you're upset with this. I understand that today was a bad day. All right. And then, listen, again, we're not problem solving for them. We're saying, tell me about it. You don't even have to have emotional support is just the idea that somebody else is hearing them. You don't have to solve it. You can just look at your daughter and say, hey, Mia, man, I understand you had a rough day today. Tell me what happened. Just the idea that she starts talking about all the stuff that happens allows her to know that you did not dismiss her emotions. Yeah. You did not say those are unimportant. You said, tell me about it. Okay. Yeah. That's all she's really looking for. That's what the support part is.
Yep, I like it. This next one's, man, this is tough. This is because we are human. We're flesh, right? This idea of offering unconditional love. I will say of every relationship that I've ever had, having that unconditional love for my kid is the easiest of all my relationship. It's the easiest and the hardest at sometimes, right? Yeah. But it's again, putting myself in their shoes as a 9 and 7-year-old. They're mess up. I don't even want to guess how hard it was for my mom when I was 9 or 7 years old, just a terror that I was. But just the idea of unconditional love, like just having this love for my kids is different than any other relationship that I've ever had. Yeah. And again, the easiest and the hardest at times to have that unconditional love, is really kind of, it's been really cool to see, because to me, having a kid has been the closest glimpse into what it must be like for God, right? To have a child, to love that child the way that I love my girls, right? And kind of, again, not saying that they're equal, because they're not, because I fail miserably at this unconditional love where I know God's love is unconditional. But to me, it's just like this glimpse inside of what that kind of looks like.
You're spot on with that whole unconditional love, and thank God that He does love unconditionally. I think the challenge here, the evident thing is, you don't base your love for your kid on their outcomes. If you score 30 points in a basketball game, I'll love you more. Right. No, that's just wrong. Yes. And that's not the type of stuff that you're typically going to say. But the experience that your child gets from your approval is really how they'll measure love. Like when they do well and you show them greater approval, they will think of approval as love. when you talk more about how they performed in a basketball game than their sibling did, right away, the kid takes, you say, listen, I love all of you equally, right? But the idea that you give more verbal approval makes them feel more or less loved. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so we might say, we don't love conditionally, but you have to really help your kids understand, and you have to weigh that out. Like, how much am I talking about the outcome, the performance, and the other kid is not having that, or even the negative outcome? How much have I been beating my kid up over the fumble in the football game,
right?
Because they're taking it now as being not approved.
Yeah.
So,
this last one, kind of almost like the nooks and the crannies of all this is this idea of, again, going back to kind of being, the helicopter parent over top and micromanaging everyone versus kind of allowing them to do whatever, again, we're hopefully going to try and teach our kids discipline. Is this idea of being a parent and not a friend.
Yeah.
And this is something I'm sure a lot of you guys can attest to. Maybe you find yourself in this similar situation, but there's a lot of people that want to be friends with their kids as their kids are growing up. Like right now in my stage of my life, I am now friends with my parents.
Right.
And again, this has been I'm now 34, right? This has been years and years of them being my parent to now building that relationship to now it's more of a friendship, right? But in the midst and the grind where I have a 9 and a 7-year-old, I cannot be my girl's friend. It's just, I'm going to fail miserably as a dad if I do. And again, this is kind of like a dichotomy of being a parent, right? You want to help support you want to, build in and invest in that relationship that may look like a friendship, but man, there's got to be a clear definition of a parent versus that friend when it comes to your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just continues to change as time goes on. I mean, I am friends with my oldest sons now who have their own kids. But now, like with my dad, in its weird way, I'm more like a parent. We're taking care of him.
Yeah.
And that's weird.
Yeah, I bet.
Right? But sometimes you're saying to your dad who can't think through and problem solve, you're saying, Dad, you can't do that. Dad. So that's a completely different role that starts to come on to you. So challenge. The challenge is take some time to assess your parenting style. Ask your kids to measure your level of strictness. I wouldn't get all caught up in their score.
Yeah.
Okay. What I would do is have some conversation about what the score is and what it means to them. All right. And so working through and understanding strictness versus permissiveness is an important thing that you and your spouse can do if you really want to get on the right track to equipping your kids to be self-sufficient, to being able to take care of themselves in terms of problem solve, and even have better relationships as they get older.
Love it. Yeah, man, I hope this kind of sparks some conversations with you and your spouse. Hopefully at the dinner table, you guys can talk a little bit about this. Again, going back to those 10 steps, man, I just think there's some good stuff in there. Go back, talk to your kids about it and kind of see where it falls. And I hope you guys are out there having a good week. We really do appreciate you guys continuing to tune in to us every week, putting out shows. Share the heck out of it on all the platforms that we have. Give us a 5-star rating because that way it populates a little bit easier for people, more guys that hear what we got to put out. So,
what would Mia rate you on the scale of 1 to 10 in strictness?
Oh, well, she's more like me than I care to admit. So she probably would be, she wouldn't be as harsh. Ava would be pretty harsh. Ava would be like, you're like a 12, Daddy. Yeah. You're a 12.
Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.